Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, promising prognosis. New this morning, encouraging data at what could be a critical time in the pandemic. Pfizer saying its COVID vaccine booster does protect against the highly mutated Omicron variant, as new cases of the strain are found in more states. We'll break down the study just released this morning and what this could mean for you and your loved ones. Stern warning, a high-stakes call between President Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin as concerns grow over Russia's escalation of forces along the Ukrainian border. President Biden promising strong economic and other measures if they invade.
He will do what he says he's going to do in response to Russian actions, so President Putin can count on that.
We'll dig into what the two leaders discussed in the 2-hour virtual meeting and why critics say the president's warning isn't enough. The defense rests after actor Jussie Smollett wrapped up 2 days of testifying in his own defense, while prosecutors point to evidence that they say shows he staged a hate crime against himself and then lied about it to police. We have the latest developments from court ahead of closing arguments today. And trending down the aisle after nearly 2 years of waiting, lots of couples expected to go big for their big day. We'll give you a look at what experts are expecting, whether you're a bride, groom, or a guest. As a bride, I can confirm it's a little bit difficult.
You got your notebook out, right? You'll be taking notes.
Exactly,
You're like, I've got 20
Just
questions.
Get ready for me to, exactly.
All right.
All right, we'll get to that later in the show. We begin this morning with a better idea, though, of how the coronavirus vaccines hold up against the new Omicron variant.
Yeah, Pfizer is out with new data this morning showing its effectiveness against the strain. Pfizer says its booster shot protects against the Omicron variant, while the initial 2 doses bring down the risks of the variant. This comes as a new study in South Africa shows the Omicron variant significantly reduces antibodies created by the Pfizer vaccine. Now, researchers say that's just one study. It shows the importance of the vaccine and a booster against the Omicron variant. At least 20 states have now reported cases of Omicron, the most recent Illinois and Florida. Despite Omicron spreading, the Delta variant remains dominant nationwide, with more hospitals seeing an uptick in COVID patients, most of them unvaccinated. Let's bring in NBC News medical contributor, Dr. Uche Blackstock. So, doctor, what's your big takeaway from this data on Pfizer? I know we're just getting it and looking over it, but if you got Pfizer, how well does it seem you're protected right now?
Right. Good morning, Joe. So one of the concerns with the Omicron variant is that it has a substantial number of mutations in the spike protein that correspond with ability of this variant to evade immunity. So this Pfizer data this morning, although we don't have all the details, is reassuring. Essentially, it's saying that if people are fully vaccinated, meaning they've received the first 2 doses and then they get a booster, that increases the neutralization activity of their antibodies back up to levels that are comparable to being fully vaccinated against the wild type variant. So essentially, the booster can overcome that reduction in neutralization activity. So again, incredibly reassuring. These are small studies. They're in the lab. We know that the immune system is much more complex, containing B cells and T cells and other components. So this is just sort of one piece of the data that we needed to hear this morning.
Bottom line, this is suggesting the booster is pretty important, right?
Incredibly important. And that's why we need to really encourage more Americans to get boosted. We know that there's waning immunity 6 months out from getting boosted with the mRNA vaccines, increases risk of infection. We may see increased breakthrough infections with Omicron variant if people are not boosted. So again, this is telling us that boosters are incredibly important, and it probably eventually will be part of the primary series of being vaccinated against COVID.
Of course, right now, the biggest concern is still the Delta variant. COVID deaths are up 57% from last week. Again, Delta is the dominant variant right now. So what makes it so severe here? Why is it driving up hospitalizations and deaths now, months into when we first saw Delta?
Right. So people still need to realize that Delta is highly, highly transmissible, much more transmissible than the wild type variant, the initial variant that emerged. And so because we're in cold weather, people are spending more time indoors. People were gathered for the Thanksgiving holiday. This is why we're seeing increased cases. And also the fact that only 6 states have indoor mask mandates. Essentially, people have returned to socializing and working as normal, but we still have this highly transmissible variant and spending more time indoors. That is why we are seeing this increase in cases, and it could prove to get worse over the holidays.
And Dr. Blackstock, the U.S. is now investing $400 million in a program to help with global distribution of coronavirus vaccines. Most of the money will go toward bringing the vaccine to remote areas of the world. Quickly on this one, but remind us why this is so important to get these vaccines to areas where we don't live.
Right. So global vaccine equity is a huge issue because it's one of the reasons why we are seeing these emerging variants with different types of mutations. If we don't vaccinate the rest of the world, especially the global south, we'll see more and more variants emerge. So this initiative is incredibly important to getting vaccines to the rest of the world. We know that donating vaccines is just one part of the issue. The other part is really working on infrastructure and logistics on the ground in the countries in the global south to help get vaccinations to each and every person.
Dr. Uche Blackstock, thanks so much for helping us out with this big story this morning.
Now to that 2-hour video call yesterday between President Biden and Russia's Vladimir Putin. There were really no breakthroughs, with both leaders refusing to back down on the issue of Ukraine. President Biden warned of a strong response if Russia attacked Ukraine, and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said the U.S. would be prepared to impose even tougher measures than before. NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joins us now for more on this. Monica, good morning. So walk us through some of the important takeaways from yesterday's call. Do we know exactly what some of those U.S. measures might be if we were to take it further?
We did learn a little bit more about that, Savannah, and the top line from this 2-hour discussion yesterday, which the White House calls productive, is that the president did warn President Putin that if he were to invade Ukraine, there will be strong and swift measures not seen before, which is a reference to 2014 when Russia last invaded Ukraine and there were economic sanctions. But now the United States is prepared to go further in the event that that happens again, and they are watching it very closely, and they are ready to essentially supply more equipment to partners in the region who also, of course, have been following this and who are poised to act if that does indeed happen. Notably, the White House said they're not sure whether President Putin has made a decision to invade Ukraine, that they're still watching that, but they wouldn't answer whether President Biden directly confronted him and asked him if that was the case. Of course, there were a number of other topics and major angles to all of this, including what might happen with Nord Stream, which is a gas pipeline that Russia has a vested interest in. Here's how Jake Sullivan put that part of the conversation into context.
When it comes to Nord Stream 2, the fact is the gas is not currently flowing through the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which means that it's not operating, which means that it's not leverage for Putin. Indeed, it is a leverage for the West, because if Vladimir Putin wants to see gas flow through that pipeline, he may not want to take the risk of invading Ukraine.
So bottom line, Savannah, again, in terms of whether troops will be sent to the region, remember right now there already are some American forces who are helping as part of a normal rotation. So that's something the White House wants to remind everybody. But it is highly unlikely that you'll see U.S. troops on the ground in Ukraine, even if that invasion does take place. But the U.S. said they're ready for any contingencies.
And Monica, what's the Kremlin saying about yesterday's meeting?
So, of course, what was notable yesterday, if we look at the images and the pictures, it was the Kremlin who put out their own video of the video conference call. We didn't get that from the White House. Instead, they only put out a photo. The president was conducting the meeting from the Situation Room. But the Kremlin is saying in a readout that Vladimir Putin warned against shifting the responsibility on Russia, and that Russia is eager to obtain reliable, legally binding guarantees, ruling out the eventuality of NATO's eastward expansion. So what's important there is that Russia has drawn a red line and said they don't want Ukraine to be a part of NATO. It currently isn't, but it might seek membership. And the reason that this is a part of the conversation is because Russia has asked the U.S. to guarantee that Ukraine won't become a part of NATO. And that's not something the president or the national security advisor said they would do. They're not going to commit to that. Instead, they're going to say it's up to NATO to decide who joins NATO. And that is still expected to be a long process if and when Ukraine does join the military alliance.
And Monica, quickly before I let you go, at the top of the show, we mentioned that critics are saying that the president's warning to potentially do more isn't enough. Why is that?
Yes, and this is certainly something that we've heard from Republican lawmakers, other critics who have wanted the U.S. president to be tougher on Russia. Remember, this was a follow-up to the high-stakes face-to-face summit they had back in June in Geneva, where it wasn't just issues like this and strategic stability that were main topics of discussion. There's also cybersecurity. There's, of course, Iran, many other topics that we do know they did delve into yesterday. And in terms of what's next, and important to remind people here, Savannah, the president will be speaking with Ukrainian President Zelensky tomorrow after several conversations with European allies in the region about this particular call with Putin yesterday.
Certainly something we'll be watching. Monica Alba at the White House for us. Thank you so much.
New developments this morning in the January 6th investigation. Mark Meadows, former President Trump's chief of staff, is now refusing to cooperate with the congressional probe after he previously agreed to appear for a deposition. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us now. Ali, good morning to you. So that deposition is still scheduled for later today. What happens if Meadows doesn't show, and what do we know? What's he saying about his decision to stop cooperating?
Well, Joe, all of the lawmakers who were skeptical when Meadows came back to the table a few weeks ago and said he would cooperate with the committee, you can say that they were right, because they were ready to move forward on a contempt referral several weeks ago. They pumped the brakes on that when Meadows said he wanted to come back to the table. And now, in talking with lawmakers on the committee last night, they are ready to push forward on that contempt referral. As for Meadows, this is why he says he stopped cooperating with the committee. Listen.
We found that in spite of our cooperation and sharing documents with them, they had issued, unbeknownst to us and not, without even a courtesy call, issued a subpoena to a third-party carrier trying to get information. And so at this point, we feel like it's best that we just continue to honor the executive privilege, and it looks like the courts are going to have to weigh in on this.
Two things here, Joe. He references those third-party carriers. We know that the committee had sent preservation requests several months ago to telecom companies, social media companies. That's likely what he's talking about there. And when he says that it's going to end up in courts, that's exactly where the former president and his allies have long wanted this to be. Yes, because they think they have a chance where the courts could rule in their favor. That's certainly what's being worked through right now, not just in terms of executive privilege on the National Archives front, but we're also seeing other legal cases work through with people like Steve Bannon on their contempt referrals. But the more places that this ends up in court, the slower the process is going to go. And that's the whole point for Trump and his allies.
You mentioned Steve Bannon, the trial against him. He faces contempt of Congress charges after refusing to cooperate with the committee. That trial is moving ahead. What's the latest with that?
Moving ahead, and probably slower than the January 6th committee wants it to be, and slower than the Department of Justice prosecutors wanted it to be. Bannon's trial in this contempt referral has now been set for next summer in July. So again, they're on the clock, it's ticking, and they need this to move forward quickly, especially because Bannon is still talking on his podcast, having other people on, having them talk about the committee's work. John Eastman, for example, who's supposed to appear for a deposition this week, has been on most recently. So Bannon's still talking about this even as that court case is working its way through.
Nally, sticking with your beat on Capitol Hill, the House was voting well into the night on bills to raise the debt ceiling and fund the military. Quickly on this one, were they able to pass it? And what's next?
They were able to pass both, and they accomplished two different things there. On the defense spending bill, this has been long on the to-do list for this Congress. The same goes for the debt ceiling, but the way that they went about the debt ceiling was to link it with Medicare sequestration cuts, effectively tying it to another issue and passing a new rule so that the Senate could go about this in a simple majority fashion. Here's how Mitch McConnell explained it.
We'll be voting on it Thursday. And I'm confident that this particular procedure, coupled with the avoidance of Medicare cuts, will achieve enough Republican support to clear the 60-vote threshold. And then later, when the majority leader decides to have the procedure, it can all occur in one day, and the actual debt ceiling vote will be done at a 51-vote threshold.
And guys, just to interpret the McConnell TikTok there, what he's saying is that what the House passed last night on the debt ceiling and Medicare, that's a new rule that's going to go over to the Senate this week. They're going to be able to pass that, but they're going to need 10 Republicans to establish this as the procedure going forward. Once those 10 Republicans get on board and President Joe Biden signs this new bill, then the Senate is going to be able to move forward on raising the debt ceiling with just 51 votes. That's going to be all Democrats. It allows Republicans and Democrats both to accomplish what they wanted here. They both have something that they can say that they won on, but no matter what, the debt ceiling gets raised. That's good for everybody. Because remember, we've never defaulted on our debt before.
Ali Vitale, thanks so much.
Closing arguments are set to begin today in the trial of Jussie Smollett. The former Empire star testified yesterday for a second day, blasting his alleged attackers as liars and denying he staged the racist attack himself. He's charged with 6 counts of felony disorderly conduct for allegedly lying to police, and if convicted, he could spend up to 3 years in prison. For more on this, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Rahema Ellis, who's on the ground in Chicago. We are also joined by Tali Farhadian-Weinstein. She's an NBC News and MSNBC legal analyst. She's also a former New York federal and state prosecutor. Good morning to both of you. Thanks for being with us on this. Rahema, I want to start with you there on the ground. So some of the biggest moments of this trial came when Smollett himself appeared on the stand twice to testify in his own defense. Tell us about what we learned from that testimony.
Good morning, Savannah. What we heard is some of what you pointed out, and that is Smollett continued to maintain his innocence as he was peppered by the prosecution about his contact with the alleged attackers. We've got some video we want to show you of Smollett going into the courtroom with family and friends for the duration of this trial. And on the witness stand, he was asked by the prosecution why he drove around the area with the alleged attackers, even circling the area of the attack. He said it was something that he regularly did, was to drive around with friends and smoking weed. Also, when he was asked questions by the prosecution, he was asked about his contact with the brothers. He said, when asked, why did he give them information about his flight return back to Chicago the night of the alleged attack? He said it was because they had a training session scheduled for later. And Smollett also went on to say and to testify that he posted information about his flight on his Instagram page because he wanted to keep his followers up to date on what he was what he would be doing that night. So, as you point out, closing arguments expected this morning. There are no cameras and no audio in the courtroom. The judge will charge the jury, and the jury could begin deliberating sometime today. Savannah?
And Rahema, thank you. You just set me up perfectly for this next question for Tali. She was just referencing, Tali, this cross-examination. And something that stuck with me from one of our other NBC News legal analysts that they said about this case, she noted that a big part of this would come down to the cross-examination of Smollett and the prosecution's ability to point out any inconsistencies. How do you think that went? And were you surprised in the first place to see Smollett take the stand?
Well, everything about this case is surprising and off book. Smollett has spent more hours on the stand than he realistically faces in terms of prison time, even if he is convicted. And, if once he made the really unusual decision to go to trial, it made sense that he took the stand because he had a lot to explain away. And he just gave an alternative explanation for lots of the facts that were really hard for him. Why did he cut a $3,500 check to the brothers? Why did he not turn over his phone to the police if he was a victim who wanted the crime against him to be investigated? And I think he did what he had to do to try to tell different stories from the ones that we heard from all of the prosecution's witnesses.
And Rahema, quickly before I let you go, let's talk about some of the other witnesses during this trial, 13 in total. That included those 2 brothers who Smollett says attacked him. What do we learn about their relationship? And is this going to come down to a he said, they said?
Yeah, it very well might come down to that. Smollett testified, who was openly gay, testified that he had a sexual encounter with one of the brothers. But on the witness stand, the brother said he did not recall that ever happening. Smollett also testified that he did give the brothers $3,500, but he said that was for training purposes to help get him in shape for an upcoming music video. And Smollett had said that his boss had said that he was fat, and so he wanted to do everything he could to get in shape for that music video. He also went on to testify that the brothers told him that if they paid them $1 million each, they would keep quiet about the attack. So, as was mentioned, this may come down to what those 6 men and 6 women believe about who's telling the truth. Savannah?
And Talia, as we mentioned, there were more than a dozen witnesses. One critical piece of evidence, though, is under dispute. There are some private messages between Smollett and one of his alleged attackers, messages that each side say tell a different story. Obviously, Rahima just laid out quite a bit of that and some of this back and forth. Just how crucial are today's closing arguments, and how challenging will this be for jurors to deliberate with that back and forth?
The closing arguments are particularly important in a case like this where, as we've been talking about, there are two different versions of what these messages mean. For example, when Smollett wrote to the brothers and said, I want you to help me with something on the low, what does that mean? And the lawyers are going to obviously interpret those differently. I think the jury is going to move through this really quickly, because, cases like this are usually not even really big enough to go to trial. And there is just not that much to sort through. And I expect that we're going to have a verdict really soon.
All right, Talia and Rahima, thank you so much.
Time to get a check on your morning news now. Weather.
Which means it's time for Bill Cairns to join us. Bill, good morning.
Good morning. Yes, we're watching that storm heading off the East Coast. Remember a couple of days ago, we were like, got a chance for snow, everyone on the East Coast. And now it's kind of like flurries, maybe you'll see a snowflake. Yeah, this storm never really panned out. It's still a storm, but just the timing of it didn't work out. It's really going to get bigger as it goes off the coast. Now, it did bring a little bit of snow to areas in upstate New York. I mean, like this was in Rome, New York, and near Brewerton, New York. So some of the lake effect areas did get some enhancement out of this off Lake Ontario and off of the snow town south of Buffalo. So some people did get the snow. And those are the areas that, you really expect to see the snow. But for everyone else, you may just get a couple flakes, and that includes our friends in D.C. all the way up through Philadelphia. But if you want accumulating snows, you really have to go up into New England. So on this map, remember the white is the clouds, the blue is the snow, and the green and the yellow is the rain. So you can see it is cold enough that there are some snowflakes falling. It's just so light that we're not going to see really any significant accumulations. Even Boston and Providence, I'd be surprised if you get more than a coating on the grass. Really, from Hartford northwards is the only areas that'll see any accumulation. So for today, still cold from the Great Lakes up through New England, still pretty mild in Texas. And, tomorrow, guys, 80 in Dallas. We're going to talk a lot in the days ahead about the incredible heat wave coming next week. It's going to be like, eye-opening.
Wow.
Let's just put it that way.
Not holiday weather. All right.
Yeah,
Thank you, Bill.
All right. See you in a bit.
Good morning news now. We'll be back with more right after this break. Back now with new developments in the 2017 murder of 2 teen girls in rural Indiana.
That's right. Authorities believe they found a social media profile that could provide them the necessary lead to find the killer. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard has the latest after speaking with one of the girls' sisters.
Authorities are asking for the public's help in tracking down this individual, who they believe is responsible for the murder of 2 teenage girls in an Indiana nature preserve. Those girls, 13-year-old Abigail Williams and 14-year-old Libby German, both dropped off near this bridge in February 2017, but found 24 hours later, murdered upstream. The story capturing the nation's attention.
Especially this year, we've been renewed of hope.
You said renewed hope. Why?
I think every time there's a new piece of evidence put out there, it's a tremendous renewed hope. Just because you see all of these people that are still there continuing to support you.
Part of that new potential evidence, the young individual in these social media photos is not a person of interest, police say, but they believe an individual used his identity for a fake social media account to potentially catfish individuals. Police say it was in use from 2016 to 2017, using the name @Anthony_shots. on Snapchat, Instagram, and other social media accounts.
If you do have any information about this Anthony Shots account, if you communicated with him, attempted to meet him, or maybe you did meet him, if you could send that information to law enforcement.
Kelsey German is Libby's older sister.
For whatever reason, they want it, and so we want to give as much information to them as we can and hopefully get this solved.
For nearly 5 years now, her family and that of Abby Williams have sought to find the killer.
I miss you a lot. Please call call the tip line.
Signs and billboards across the community. The area the girls were found murdered here in Carroll County, Indiana. The girls dropped off just after 1:30 p.m. on February 13, 2017, near this old abandoned railroad bridge on the outskirts of Delphi, a rural town of about 3,000 people. Libby German, one of the girls, posted this photo of her friend Abby Williams on social media the next hour. But they then went missing, found the next day dead, about a half-mile away from that bridge. Police recovered Libby German's phone and discovered this short video of a man on her phone and this short audio clip of a man who police believed to be the assailant, also found on Libby's phone.
You know, she had to be feeling threatened enough to have the wherewithal to start videoing this man that was walking. Smart girl, 14, but wise beyond her years.
Police are calling him a suspect and have said they believe the killer lives, works, or frequently visits Delphi. The mother of Abigail Williams talking to NBC News just months after her daughter's killing.
It's a very tough situation to live with, and we have a very small, tight-knit community, and to think that this person is still right there in our own backyard is overwhelmingly horrible.
The families taking whatever leads they can get to find their daughter's killer.
We have so much faith that this is going to be solved. Libby and Abby are both going to get justice.
Our thanks to Von Hilliard for that report.
Yeah, well, let's take a look at what's making news around the world this morning.
NBC's Matt Bodner joins us from Moscow. Matt, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. We'll start this hour off in Germany with the end of an era. Germany has a new chancellor, Olaf Scholz. He was confirmed this morning, taking the reins from Angela Merkel after her 16 years in office. Scholz is a member of the Social Democrats, and he's built a three-party coalition government with the Greens and the Free Democrats. We move along now to Chile, where the Chilean Congress yesterday approved same-sex marriage with an overwhelming majority. This makes Chile the 8th Latin American country to allow same-sex marriage, the 31st in the world. This has been on the table for years, but until very recently, it was opposed by the outgoing president, Sebastián Piñera. He is expected to sign this bill into law. And we finish this hour in Iraq, where a clay tablet carrying a fragment of the Epic of Gilgamesh, considered to be one of the oldest written works in the world, was returned after being looted from a museum during the Gulf War. The tablet was believed to have been illegally imported to the United States in 2003, where it was then sold to the owners of Hobby Lobby. Federal agents seized the tablet in 2019. Back to you guys.
All right, Matt.
All right. Thank you so much, Matt. Now, it's been more than 15 years since Scott Peterson was sentenced to death for the murder of his wife and unborn son. Today, he's set to face a judge again. Coming up, the new sentencing and what will be different this time around.
The holidays often mean holiday parties, and a new study says we might not be that good at knowing when we've had too much to drink. You need to know before you celebrate. Today is National Brownie Day, and the folks at One Cannabis brand are celebrating with the world's largest pot-infused brownie. The so-called Scrumptious Monster weighs 850 pounds and took 5 people more than 24 hours to bake and prepare. The treat is infused with 20,000 milligrams of THC, which is the primary psychoactive ingredient in marijuana, the maximum amount allowed for a medical marijuana patient in this state. Massachusetts-based company MaryMed plans to sell the giant brownie to a medical patient. No word yet if that recipe is going to be in the next season of British Bake Off.
Are you a fan?
I've seen a few episodes. I'm guessing no.
That's hilarious. Wow, that thing is big. All right, thanks, Joe. All right, now opening statements are set to get underway this morning in the trial of former Minnesota police officer Kim Potter. She's charged with first and second-degree manslaughter in the shooting death of Dante Wright last April. The incident drew national attention after footage from Potter's body cam was released to the public, which showed the moments leading up to Wright's death. NBC News correspondent Shaq Brewster is live in Minneapolis with the latest as the trial gets underway. Shaq, good morning. Good to see you. So walk us through what we're expecting to hear from both the defense and prosecution this morning as the trial does get underway. And do we expect to see Kim Potter herself testify?
We do expect to see Kim Potter testify, but that's not to come until later in this trial. That was something that the defense said, but they won't be doing that until it's time for the defense to present their case. What we will see today are those opening statements. This is when jurors, the jury panel that has now been seated, they'll be able to hear a roadmap, essentially, of what this case will look like. You'll hear from the prosecution, detail what kind of witnesses will come up, what kind of evidence they'll show, and what they want these jurors to focus on as they're making these presentations. It is also very likely we'll hear opening statements come from the defense, which will also give us an idea of what defense witnesses will likely take the stand, and what we should hear from Kim Potter, who the defense attorneys have said she will take the stand at some point in this trial. So consider today the start of the main part of this trial. We should really get an idea of what we should expect over the next 2 or so weeks, Savannah.
And check, yesterday we actually got news that a Minnesota resident was arrested and charged with harassing the judge who's presiding over this trial. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is a 32-year-old man. His name is Cortez Rice, and he's charged with harassing the judge in this case. A couple of weeks ago, what really started this was there was a live stream of a protester. He was the main protester, and he was outside of what he believed to be the judge's apartment. He did that because he says it was after the judge denied audio and visual coverage of the trial. Her initial ruling said that there would be no cameras in the courtroom. He was opposed to that and was protesting that, and at one point in that live stream even appeared inside the building, inside of a hallway of this apartment complex. So he was arrested earlier this week, and he, based on that hearing that he just had, he'll be held on bond. So it's unlikely he'll be even released until this trial is over, Savannah.
All right, Shaq Brewster, thank you so much.
California judge plans to re-sentence Scott Peterson today to life in prison long after he was convicted of murdering his pregnant wife Lacey and their unborn son. Peterson was sentenced to death in 2005 and had been sitting on death row for more than 15 years before the California Supreme Court tossed out his sentence last year. Prosecutors say they have no plans to try and bring the death penalty back for him. NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas joins us now from Redwood City, California. Guad, good morning to you. So walk us through why Peterson is receiving this new sentence now, almost 15 years after he was convicted in the first place.
Joe, good morning. Well, when the California Supreme Court ruled that a resentencing was needed, it was because they said that when the original jury was selected, there was an improper screening for bias against the death penalty. So ultimately, here we are now in 2021, and this resentencing is scheduled. We know that Scott Peterson was in San Quentin for a number of years on death row. He has since been moved to county jail here awaiting for this resentencing.
And Guad, we know Peterson was convicted of murdering his wife, Lacey. So why have California state prosecutors announced they have no plans of putting the death penalty back on the table for him?
Joe, so the district attorney said in a court filing that they consulted with Lacey Peterson's family about the resentencing. And after having the conversation, the family said the process to seek the death penalty once again would be too difficult to endure. So that's why they ultimately settled for life in prison without parole. And that's a decision that they made. That's what they've asked for. I should also mention that there is a separate process in court where Scott Peterson's defense attorneys have sought a retrial because of new information that one of the jurors during the original trial did not disclose all information necessary about her personal life. There is a hearing scheduled for that in late February where the judge will hear both sides' arguments.
And Guad, as for today, do we know if Peterson is expected to speak at all at the sentencing? And if so, what might we hear from him?
So his attorney said that he does want to speak during this hearing if the judge allows it. The attorney has not disclosed any details of what Scott Peterson would be saying in court if he's allowed to speak. It would be the first time we hear him speak in court. He chose not to testify during the original trial, so we would have to wait and see if the judge allows him to speak today. Like I said, no details have been shared of what it is that he would want to say in the courtroom, Joe.
Guad Venegas, and we know you'll keep an eye on it throughout the day. Thanks so much. Time now for your weekly checkup.
NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar joins us on set to discuss the latest health headlines that you might have missed. Dr. Azar, always great to have you. All right, it's the holiday season, Christmas parties, drinking with family and friends. It's going to happen. There's going to be an uptick. And there's this new study from the UK that shows evidence that we tend to underestimate how drunk we are.
Right.
Maybe that's not such a surprise, but that can, of course, be a safety concern, especially with something like driving. How do you know when you shouldn't be behind the wheel, when you should have somebody else drive you or leave your keys?
No, I don't know how, if any of us is really that good at knowing how drunk we are, right? But basically, right, these researchers in the UK had a bunch of students, average age 24, drink beer or wine until they reached a threshold of blood alcohol or breath alcohol concentration that exceeded the limit for driving. And then they basically, each time they were drinking, they asked them to rate whether or not they thought that they had exceeded it or had met it. And basically by the second day, over half of the students were wrong. They basically had exceeded the threshold, but they were unaware, and it was proportional. The more they drank, the less good they were at realizing how drunk they were. So doctors' orders.
What a study.
What's that?
What a study.
What a great, right, what fun study. I'm sure they got paid, too. If you have to ask if you're too drunk to drive, you probably are. We all know this rule. Basically, 1 drink an hour, right? If you start to exceed that, you're going to get drunk a lot faster. And always do a glass of water between every drink. It works. Yeah. I'm here to tell you.
Do you think they have to pick, like, Cab or Chardonnay for the study? They got to
I'll
pick?
find out.
Okay, great. You
I
can
will
let
get
us
back
know
to us on that
I'll never
next
find
week.
out.
So we got used to seeing you virtually during the pandemic, and many patients saw their doctors virtually. Now we're learning more about how effective that was. So what types of health conditions were virtual visits just as effective as in person?
Right. And so basically, Joe, what these researchers wanted to find out was if you replace or you augment regular visits with virtual visits, is it as clinically effective? Do patients like it? Are patients satisfied with it? And they found that in these 5 domains, it actually was quite effective. So we have diabetes, respiratory illness, pain disorders, cardiovascular diseases, and neurological illnesses. And I've said this before, you know, it's harder we did a spot on this a couple of weeks ago. Older folks find it more difficult to do this, but for so many patients, for a quick follow-up, for just a check-in, it really, really can be amazing. So my doctor's orders for everyone are, if you haven't done it yet, ask your doctor if this is a capability that they have. It's definitely something, doesn't have to replace, but it certainly can augment your regular visits, and it really can be quite effective.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if it's tough for you to find the time to get to the doctor to do a quick check-in like that, it could certainly be helpful. All right, last but not least, there's this new index, a 7-item scale that can help determine a person's level of wisdom.
Right.
Specifically. Tell us about that.
So this is, I'm gonna read you these domains, but basically there's 7 domains that are correlated with wisdom, which correlates with well-being and good mental health. These are things like self-reflection, pro-social behavior, emotional regulation, accepting diverse perspectives, decisiveness, social, I can't even read my own. Advising, I can't read my own writing, and spirituality. So essentially what they did, they took these participants and they gave them 7 statements that correlate with these 7 domains. Statements like, for example, I avoid situations where my help is needed, or I remain calm under pressure. And you basically rate it from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And they really found that the ones that are correlated with, you know, the good stuff correlates with improved well-being and mental fitness and everything. And if you score really, you know, negatively on a lot of these domains, that correlates with depression and anxiety and things like that. But you look at that and you sort of ask yourself, how am I doing on these? You know? But I love the example, I avoid situations where my help is needed. Can you imagine if you said strongly agree to that? You've got work to do.
Exactly.
Unwise.
Exactly, unwise.
Exactly.
A new definition of wisdom, too. I like that. So.
And 2 studies, by the way, I would have liked to have been a participant in. You know? 2 interesting ones. You know, you hear a lot about stuff
you were so pro-science. I love that.
Yes. Pro-wine.
What if you give people the wisdom test after they drink the wine and beer, though?
That's an interesting twist. I like that.
Right.
You should conduct that one. Sign us up.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Azar. Appreciate
Always great
it.
to have you. Thank you.
All right. Coming up, the season of gift giving is also the season of scams.
She noticed I was on the phone, had the phone up to my ear. I think she noticed that I was probably looking a little panicked. She knew the signs and she caught on right away.
The popular gift thieves are after and what you need to look out for so you can keep your wallet and personal information safe after the break.
Lately, Lately, we've been talking a lot about the water crisis out west. We've also showed you how Colorado is seeing a dramatic lack of snow so far this winter. That's causing all kinds of problems for the state's critical ski industry. Well, now some scientists there are looking at ways to combat that, to improve the ability to create rain or snow through a method called cloud seeding. NBC News correspondent Cal Perry joins us from Avon, Colorado, with more on why this is causing some controversy. Cal, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. Certainly communities are going to need more education. We're seeing that in New Mexico, but this is a program that's been going on since World War II. It's happening all over the world. It is a new look at an old method, as you said, to try to make it snow and rain more. The mile-high city is bone dry.
It's kind of scary, I'm not going to lie.
Breaking records, it has not snowed at all this winter. Put another way, it hasn't snowed in at least 231 days.
We've always had water issues out west.
It's a little unsettling.
It's not just Denver. The otherwise picturesque Rocky Mountain resort towns are mostly bare. Vail, crown jewel of Colorado ski country, only 7% of its terrain is currently accessible. That's 25 of 317 trails. Only 6 of 33 lifts are open. Come here to the Dillon Reservoir where Denver gets its water, and it becomes clear this is not just a weather story. This is not just a ski story. This is a climate story about the West, which is in the middle of a water crisis. For the first time ever, earlier this year, the federal government declared a water shortage on the Colorado River. All of this brings Mike Eitel to the top of the Rockies. He's a senior water resource specialist with the Colorado River Water Conservation District. They call it cloud seeding, or weather modification, blasting silver iodide into the sky to improve a cloud's ability to make it rain or snow. They say as much as 2 to 12% more per storm.
This is moisture in the cloud that would not fall out normally. So where I use the analogy of squeezing a sponge, you just get a little bit more out of every storm. Every drop counts. It matters.
Not just on the ground, these programs extend to aircraft. And here, it's partially paid for by downriver states that desperately need the water.
State funding comes from the lower basin states like California, Arizona, Nevada. They also supply the state a significant amount of funds that's dispersed throughout all the programs, not just this one.
How important do you think this will be going forward?
I think this is just another tool in the toolbox for us here in the water supply effort. It's measured in years and decades rather than individual storms, if you ask me. It's a long-term project. The drought maybe makes it more of a concern, but we're still doing it in wet years. We're doing it in dry years.
Guys, in covering this climate tragedy, we're so often looking for the here and the now, ways to show the viewer what's happening now, the effects that are occurring right now. And that is this story. That is the story of Western water. The West is running out of water, whether it's the reservoirs of Lake Mead, which have never been lower, the snowpack, which is disintegrating. It is a tragic situation. This is the only interview, the only story, though, that I've covered where I've talked to somebody who says they can add water back into the system. It's not a conversation about storage. It's a conversation about possibly getting it to rain and snow more, guys.
All right. Cal Perry in Colorado. Cal, thank you.
Now to a new scam alert that you should watch out for. Government investigators say gift card scams are surging, with tens of thousands already victimized just as the holiday shopping season picks up pace. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello has more.
'Tis the season for gift buying, and tonight the Federal Trade Commission warns it's also the season for a surge in gift card scams. In just the first 9 months of this year, the FTC reports nearly 40,000 people were scammed, losing $148 million, almost surely an undercount. Here's how it works. Scammers email or call unsuspecting victims posing as a love interest, company representative, even a government agent, telling the victim they owe money and must pay now, or they'll be arrested or their bank accounts frozen. The scammer tells the victims to buy gift cards at a local store, then read the card number to the scammer over the phone. Target gift cards were the most preferred by scammers. $2,500, the median amount lost by consumers. Then gift cards from Google Play, Apple, eBay, and Walmart.
Gift cards are for gifts. They're not for making payments. So if someone approaches a consumer saying that they need to make a payment using a gift card, it's a scam.
In Idaho, Julia Hillary got an email claiming there was a fraudulent charge on her Amazon account and providing a number to call back. When she did, the scammer told her to stay on the phone, go to the store, and buy a $500 gift card to fix the problem. Thankfully, the local store clerk recognized the scam and refused to sell her the card.
I think she noticed I was on the phone, had the phone up to my ear. I think she noticed that I was probably looking a little panicked. She knew the signs and she caught on right away.
The red flags, say fraud experts, unsolicited calls or emails saying you owe money. If anyone tells you to buy gift cards and read back the numbers, it's a scam. Social Security and the IRS will never call asking for personal information or money. Scammers prefer gift cards because they're not traceable. Once you use them, they're gone, which means if you're scammed, trying to get your money back, it's nearly impossible. Joe and Savannah.
All right, good morning there, Tom Costello. Thank you so much.
Time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
Bertha Coombs is with us this morning. Hi, Bertha.
Hi, Joe and Savannah. So if you were trying to access some of your favorite apps like Netflix yesterday and had problems, it's because Amazon's cloud computing unit, AWS, was hit with a massive outage, which started at around 11 Eastern and lasted more than 7 hours. Among the services that reported issues, there included Disney+, Netflix, Slack, Ticketmaster, stock trading app Robinhood, and Coinbase, the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the country. That outage also brought down critical tools used within Amazon itself, warehouse and delivery workers reporting that they couldn't access the apps that they use to scan packages or access delivery routes. Everything was restored by about 6:30 Eastern last night. Meantime, Visa is launching a new crypto consulting practice in an effort to push deeper into cryptocurrency and help its vendors. According to Visa's European crypto lead, the company processed about $3.5 billion in digital currency transactions over the course of a year from October 2020 to September 2021. The company allows users to spend their crypto at over 80 million merchants. And if you're thinking, hey, how can I give a gift of Bitcoin? You know, I want to give somebody $50,000. Well, now you're able to send crypto as a gift on the U.S.'s largest cryptocurrency exchange, Coinbase. The new gifting feature allows you to send 5 different assets, including Bitcoin and Ether, to anybody, including people who don't yet have a Coinbase account or a wallet. All you need is their email address, and the recipient receives an email with directions on how to set up a Coinbase account and claim the gift. And I will tell you, just my PSA, if you invested in Bitcoin this year and made big gains, you're going to have a big tax bill. Did you know that you can actually make donations, charitable donations, using cryptocurrencies? So check that out. That's a good way to sort of give back, do good after you've done well.
Good advice there, Bertha.
Very
we like
good
that.
advice.
And don't gift us Bitcoin. We don't want it. So we wouldn't know what to do with it.
No, we wouldn't.
All right. Thank you, Bertha.
Yeah, definitely donate it before you give it to us.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right, coming up, the holidays are a popular time for engagements.
With more people getting the booster, wedding season could make an even bigger comeback next year. From color to destinations to even some retro inspiration, we're taking a look at what's in and what's out in 2022 next. Yesterday, we brought you the top health and wellness trends for next year. Today, we're taking a look at some of the top wedding trends you can expect to see in 2022. I think that might interest someone here.
It certainly does. December is the busiest month, actually, for engagements. And with so many people ready to put the pandemic behind them, 2022 could be a booming year for the wedding industry as couples prepare to tie the knot. Here to break down what we can expect to see is Martha Stewart Weddings digital editor, Sarah Schreiber. Sarah, good morning. Thank you so much for being here with us. So we know the holiday season comes, of course, itself with a lot of wedding proposals just in the month of December. But even besides that, I can speak from experience. There is a backlog of engaged people trying to book venues, trying to get appointments to look at dresses. It is crazy. What are your tips for navigating this crowded time?
Absolutely. It's a busy time. There are 2.5 million weddings happening next year. There is a backlog of couples, as you said, couples in 2020, couples in 2021, trying to tie the knot in 2022. It's crazy. I start by taking a deep breath and first and foremost, sourcing your wedding planner. This is really important. They are going to be able to help you navigate every decision, from finding that dress, from booking that venue that you want, from maybe getting married on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday if you have to. Kind of outsourcing these decisions will definitely help long term.
So, Sarah, now that vaccination rates are increasing around the globe, can we expect to see things like destination weddings or large gatherings make more of a comeback in 2022?
Definitely. The events world is looking up in terms of destination and event size. But as I always say, with all things, take precautions and stay informed, especially with destination events. Couples and their guests, they're so excited to travel. The borders have reopened. It's really an exciting time, but staying informed, watching those regulations, checking for vaccination tips, checking for any quarantine or isolation or testing requirements will help you keep your guests in the loop.
Yeah, and in my own experience, getting as much of that in writing in a contract is certainly helpful as well. All right, Sarah, talk to some of us about the big trends that we're seeing as weddings make this comeback, and including anything that you're seeing couples and planners do to keep guests safe.
For sure. In terms of safety, I think it's all about communication. It's about talking through vaccination requirements from the couple's perspective. It's talking about testing requirements. So I think kind of finding ways to make everyone comfortable is really important as we approach wedding season in 2022. And it's going to be an exciting one. I think in some ways we're looking back to 2020 and micro weddings and building on the intimate events that we threw then. So kind of maintaining that intimacy, and maybe it's setting up a cocktail lounge and allowing guests to kind of mingle and chat after not seeing each other for, 2 years. So it's a really exciting time. And 70s, it's going to be the summer of love, 2.5 million weddings. So expect a little bit of a retro throwback and some pressed florals and rib textures like corduroy. So exciting stuff.
Ooh, very exciting. Sarah Schreiber, thank you so much for getting me excited and not only feeling the stress of it all. Thank you.
Have fun with it, too. It's fun, right? Totally fun. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.